Hey there, everyone. I should turn on my mic before I fade out the music. That would be better. Hello, everyone. It is Sunday, so it is Weekend Winters. I am Christy Winters. You are my loving, wonderful, adorable, fantastic audience. So happy Sunday to you, wherever it is, whenever it is you are. Especially the whenever. We did our daylight savings time here in Europe, I guess, yesterday. And as a consequence, this might be starting at a different time for you, depending on what time zone you're in. In which case, if it screws you up, I'm sorry. The time zone changes screw me up every single year. Every single year, because they do it at different times, and when you have to work across, the math. But anyway, we are about 10 days out now from the election. And so in this episode, like obviously next weekend is going to be just after Halloween. We will be just around the corner with the Tuesday. We will have a lot of the early vote numbers finalized, the mail-in ballot vote, absentee voting, all of that in person, like drop-off boxes and posted, sorted. Just to say, yeah, I've got my, in the spirit, stick out my chest, in the spirit of the day, yeah, I've got my Dump Trump t-shirt on. Now it is 2016, but it's still relevant. So I thought it would be fine for the show. And it is absolutely fine. All right, so how is everyone doing? I want to say hi to people in the chat. Oh, I guess I could go over now that you see my dumb Trump t-shirt. That was really the only reason I had the big camera on here. So we can fade over here to the other camera where you guys can see yourselves and see the chat. So I think I'm going to just make myself a little bit bigger, and because I'm an egotist, egoistisch, as they say in German. And yeah, I'm gonna just have a little bit of a pep talk before the election here, and talk a bit about I was thinking about having a bit of a discussion about a video I'm working on but didn't complete because I was on vacation and decided not to, but talk a little bit about critical race theory and how people don't understand it. So first I want to say, hey trans gamer girl, how you doing? City Life, Sib Wolf, Flint Reed, Done in the chat. Hello everyone. I think I saw a couple. Yeah, the Lucky Wanderer, thank you for stopping by as well. DNF fan also, so thank you everyone for stopping by and spending some time with me, spending part of your Sunday with me. All right, yeah, flush the turd. Yeah, absolutely. Abso-freaking-lutely. Let me just change my mic here a little bit. I think that sound is all right. I haven't spoken yet this morning, so this is the first Christy voice of the day, although I have had plenty of coffee. So the vocal cords should be warmed up, just not in use. Now I know that for those of us on the left, there is still a lot of anxiety because of 2016. A lot of us, yeah, I mean, I think it's a completely reasonable reaction. We know from psychology that people remember bad things and dwell on them a lot more clearly and more intensely and more often than on the positive thing. So just think about like when something good happened to you and see how much of that feeling like is recreated, like the excitement and the joy, and then can think about a time when you were really embarrassed about something. You did something really embarrassing. I at least always viscerally feel the negative memories, even if what I was embarrassed about happened when I was 8, and or you know, like the people who were around me probably don't even remember that it happened, right? But when I recall it, I have that intense negative, you know, whether it's shame or embarrassment or awkwardness, it's almost like I'm right back in the moment. And yet, when I think about something good, like when I was awarded my British Academy postdoctoral fellowship and I was opening up the letter, I don't get the same intense high of like, hey, I just won the fellowship, that's really competitive, and I've got a job for the next 3 years sorted, and I'm a British Academy fellow. Like, it's not even comparable. So for those of us on the left, I think we have to realize that in any other election year, if you take out 2016 and you look at the numbers and the state of the race and the stability of this race since months now, like since almost like the start of this race, people in any other, like if you take out 2016, people might be comparing this to like Ronald Reagan sweeping against Mondale, or other, you know, when Barack Obama really blew John McCain out of the. There is a skew to all of the media doesn't want to get it wrong again. The pollsters are being far more specific and being more technical in their, you know, they add more caveats up front in order to clarify. So they're still data led, but I think there's more of an whereas last time people would just put out national polls and then not comment on it. Now, people will put up national polls and then say, but of course, it's really the statewide polls that you have to look at if you want to know where the Electoral College delegates are going. So I think that, and those are all, like, in the aggregate, I think good things. But I do think that I'm personally, I don't know about you guys, but I am so tired of people, like, terrorizing us. I mean, I get it. Why people are nervous about 2016, but a perfectly good poll will come out with a reasonable result or even a lead outside the margin of error, and someone on the left will be like, they didn't, Speedy, let's go out and vote, we're losing, oh, the polls are like, oh, Trump is gonna win. Like, calm down. Calm down. It's okay to take on this information and say, it doesn't matter what the polls say because the only poll that counts is on election day. But right now, we should feel motivated that because Biden is ahead, we need to turn his voters out. Instead of saying the polls were wrong in 2016, so always act like you're, like just be terrified that you're gonna be lied to again on election night. Why not say, hey, look, Biden is up 7% in Wisconsin. Let's get that 7% out to the polls. So I'm just like personally tired of being emotionally terrorized by people who are my allies. And, that's just, I guess, a personal thing. Maybe I spend way too much time on Twitter. No, I definitely spend way too much time on Twitter. But I just feel like the psychological burden of this is, like, we can be more positive about what it means to get ourselves across the finish line. Hey, Sib Wolf, I'm glad you stopped by for a live show. Welcome back. Welcome back to the live show. So, in terms of good news, I do think that Democrats should feel like we are doing the right thing and we need to keep doing these things that we're doing in order to make sure that we get Trump out of office on November 3rd or the 4th, the morning of the 4th, whenever, or the 5th, whenever the election is decided. Yay, good. Yeah, your vote is banked. Nice. Yeah, I posted mine like on the 8th of October or something, and it was signature required. So yeah, mine should also be there in Wisconsin, even though I can only vote for the federal level offices because I'm not a state resident, but I'm a federal citizen. So that's how that works. But anyway, absolutely fabulous numbers. These I don't think, so we're going to look a little bit at the early vote. We've already had over 57 million people. How many people voted not in Wisconsin, how many people voted in 2016? Oh, hey, perfect. Ask and you shall receive. All right, yes, I accept all your cookies. What other blocks, pop-ups are you going to put in? All right, with less than 2 weeks until Election Day, more than 56 million people have already voted. Election experts predict historic rates of turnout. Texas has been crazy. Texas has been just off the chain, off the charts. And I will, we can look at that too, because Harris County, I mean, there are places, like, it's, woo. All right. So more than 257 million people in the United States, 18 or older, and nearly 240 million citizens are eligible to vote this year. So, yes, a 50% turnout rate would be about 120 million, which means, a quarter of 50% would be, all right. According to Michael McDonald, professor at the University of Florida, who runs the U.S. Elections Project, eligible voters include people living overseas, but not non-citizens or people convicted of a felony, depending on state law. It's possible that 85 million people could vote before November 3rd. With 150 million voting in total, I've seen estimates of closer to like upwards of 165 million. Great. That would mean an eligible voter turnout rate of more than 62%. I think that the recent high for the U.S. was 2018. Voter turnout. Oh, hey, hello, all caps. Out. And that, I think, was 60% in 2018. Oh, wow. Even then, it was only 57%. I thought we'd cleared... When was the last time we cleared 60% in the United States? Let's find out. Well, okay. Early 90s, historic. No, I don't want historic. Maybe it depends on if you consider, like, who's eligible versus all citizens. Yeah, because if you take popular vote as a percentage of the total population, not everyone in the population is able to vote. And so that artificially reduces the aggregate participation rate because you're forcing those who can't participate into the non-participation thing. Whereas if you screen them out, then that would bump it up. So again, it depends on how you look at these numbers, and the right way to do it, I think, if you want to know, you shouldn't have it as the popular vote as a percentage of the total population. I think you need to have it as the popular vote as a percentage of the total eligible population, because again, otherwise it's artificially lowered. So I can't be bothered enough to actually look up those numbers accurately. People are always like, oh, US has terrible vote rates. I'm like, well, yeah, that is true. We do, compared to European countries. But again, sometimes it can look artificially lower depending on if you do total population or total eligible voter population. Let's see. So how would that compare to eligible? Oh, from fast. See, here we go. This is what I'm just saying. 2008, 61%. See what I mean? This is precisely the number. This is what I was saying. It depends on who you count. All right, let me up this a bit because you guys are gonna have a hard time. So if you look at the eligible voter rate from 2008, it was 61.5%. Whereas the one you just saw, it was like 51% or something, so it does make a difference. And yeah, higher voter turnout is better for Democrats. There are generally just more Democratic voters, potential voters in a population, but Republicans have better rates of actually getting to the polls because they have people who are like seniors who tend to vote for Republicans, and they're the most reliable voter base out there because they're retired, they've got all day, and people who are moving around and need to do their registration, like younger people who are moving from place to place to get jobs, or people who are more, temporary housing, who have to do more paperwork to keep up their registration, and, they're less likely to vote. Flint asks, looks like the Rust Belt will swing at this time. I don't know. I guess, what do you consider the Rust Belt? Is like, I think, like the Midwest, I guess. I think for me, the Rust Belt is slightly lower. I'm not counting on Iowa or Ohio. Like, those aren't even in my projection. I'm looking at Pennsylvania, and then I'm kind of assuming that Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, Michigan and Wisconsin being the other one, and Pennsylvania will all go to Biden. If Florida goes to Biden on election night, it's over. Like, we might know the results early on. Like, if Biden wins in Florida, and it's by, like enough of a comfortable margin where, the Republicans, I mean, maybe they'll come in and try to get rid of 150,000 votes. But I don't know the procedures for recounts in Florida. But if the seniors swing to Biden hard the way they currently are in the polls, and they are voting early and they're banking that, and Trump can't turn out his people in the middle of a pandemic spike, there's still 10 days for this spike to spread, and for people to get ill and have to quarantine. And if you go to a Trump rally today and you show symptoms of COVID next week, Wednesday, you can't go to the polls and vote in person. And it might be too late for you to, like, get your mail-in ballot and sort all that stuff out in the state you live in. So, anyway, yeah, Texas numbers are off the chain, man. So, yeah, 61%. That was a really high turnout for Barack Obama and John McCain. And what are they saying? 62%? So, yeah, that would be phenomenal. But that's 85 million people could vote before, 115 total. I mean, I've seen numbers of upwards of 160. 165, I think, is pushing it, but not impossible. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that states that didn't have voter early vote processes, like Pennsylvania, for instance, is pretty new. Texas is seeing, I guess, as it was pointed out by Donna here in the chat, that Texas participation rates are just, like, historic. So, yeah, it's gonna see. Oh, there's a chart. Boom, boom, boom. Back in the well, of course, these numbers here, back in the 1840s, only white property men could vote, so there was a much smaller pool of eligible voters. So, and I don't know about how accurate these rates are in terms of, like, where they got their data from. I kind of like, once you get into the 1900s and you get, so yeah, you can kind of see here, it starts to go down. Now, women's suffrage didn't automatically do it, but yeah, one of the things is that well, only white women, of course, really applied to the suffrage movement, but you start to get more non-participation because you get people who just don't go and vote. There are a lot of anti-feminist women who didn't think women should be in politics, and therefore I assume that they didn't, once they got the vote, they didn't actually use it because they didn't think they should. So, yeah, after the Civil War and the passage of the 13th, 14th, and 15th, we saw very high turnout from freed African Americans. Despite the efforts of suppressing them, they had really high turnout. So that would kind of explain the spike here. So yeah, you earlier on had white propertied males, and then once you get into the 1960s, here in post-Civil War rates. Although it was up in the 80s before that as well. It really started to kind of like around the turn of the century, 1900, I would say, is when you get a secular decline, bottoming out right before the Great Depression. And then by the time you get Depression-era stuff, start to see another spike. Anyway, I'm not a historian of voter turnout. I kind of only care about voter turnout since like about the 1950s. That's what I'm looking at, the modern era, shall we say. And yeah, I mean, what we know about people self-reporting is that Democrats are voting, self-report as having high intent or high propensity for saying they're going to vote early in person, or to do a mail in their ballots. And Republicans are far more likely, and I'm not saying that all Republicans are waiting till election day. There are states, I'm sure, like Florida and maybe also in Texas, where people are going to vote early and in person, or posting it to a box or whatever else, because they're seeing the Democrats line up. Others maybe are just sensible people. But the disproportionate number of people planning on voting on election day are self-identified Republicans and Trump supporters. I should say Republicans. I mean, they don't always ask about voter intent. And again, just from my point of view, the longer they wait, where this COVID outbreak is just getting worse and worse, it's going to make it harder to vote. There's going to be, longer lines. They're going to require masks. There's going to be spacing, and people are going to be stood outside in November, potentially for hours. And they're not going to be used to that in a lot of places. They're not going to be used to, and if a machine goes down or a poll worker doesn't turn up, I mean, all you need is for like one thing to go wrong, a paper jam. And suddenly that has a cascading effect. And the other thing that we know about, those kind of borderline voters is that they will see, if you go to your local polling station and the line is wrapped around the building 5 times and you still have to park the car, you're like, I might not get home until after midnight. And you might have things to do. You might have kids to take care of. So all of this, I'm expecting there to be huge lines on election day. I'm expecting for a lot of people who've never had to wait in line before to vote because they're in a white area that's very well resourced, are suddenly going to be like lining up around the door, maybe with a bad knee or something, So now they aren't that smart on the right. You know how Trump loves the poorly educated. Yeah, 57 plus million people. And look at this participation. And in really, like California, you kind of expect, for instance, early voting because they have a tradition of mail-in balloting. Same thing up here with, I think, like Washington and Oregon, don't they also have a lot of mail-in ballots? But Texas has just been blowing up. And Florida also. Very aggressive, not aggressive, but very impressive early voting. So for the states, not all states have party registration by individual. But for those of the states that do have it, this is where we can look at some of the banking. When you talk about banking votes. One is we've got California, Colorado, Connecticut, Florida, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Maine, North Carolina, Nebraska, New Jersey, New Mexico, Nevada, Oklahoma, Oregon, Pennsylvania, and South Dakota. In terms of percentage, this is the total vote and the total vote by party registration across all of those states. So again, California is going to skew these numbers a little bit because of just the sheer numbers of them. Whereas like in Nebraska, you're probably going to see more Republicans turning out. But generally, almost 50% of the people already banking their votes are self-identified Democrats. Only over a quarter are Republicans, and no party affiliation. This 22%, these people tend to break for Biden. So if people without an affiliation, like let's say in a worst case scenario, 6 out of every 10 independent voter, no party voter, goes to Biden, then for every 10 people, like he is building up a lead that Trump has to catch up with just Republican votes. So if he's getting 4 and Biden's getting 6 for every 10, that gap that the Democrats are building just gets bigger and bigger with the independents. And Trump needs to dig further and further into the Republicans, just self-identified Republicans, to make up for that, because his independent-leaning Republicans aren't doing it for him, not keeping him even. So that is good. In-person voting for this is interesting because I think this takes up California, and we have a lot of swing states in here. We've got Colorado, Florida, Nevada, and North Carolina, and these are all definitely states that you should be watching on election night. In this case, you see that Republicans turn out. Now again, you've got here Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, and South Dakota, and that's gonna get, again, you're not gonna get a lot of Democratic vote out of those states. So having it pull even, I think, again, is really good, especially when you got to figure, based on the data, that independents are breaking for Biden. So we're going to see. Now, obviously, like I said, a lot of these percentages are depending on the states. And I'm not expecting a huge Biden turnout, in Kansas or in Kentucky. It would be great if we can get Mitch McConnell out, but it's an uphill climb in those states. Let's see, in terms of returned mail-in ballots, now this also includes, for instance, like in-person vote versus early mail-in return. So like some of these states are double counted, like Colorado is in here. You also get some Florida in here. So you get a mixture of mode of voting. But in this case, when we look at who posted their votes early, you can see the Democrats just have an overwhelming advantage. So it's, in some ways you'd have to look. It'd be nice if they have it by state. If you go to a place like Colorado, where's Colorado? There. And if they would say Colorado Democrats mail-in vote plus Colorado Democrats in-person voting, and then compare that. So you get one state. Do they? That would be how I would do it. Because I would actually break it down by state and then look at the mode of voting and then look at the percentages. Because if, for instance, like here it's crazy different. I shouldn't use ableist terms. I'm sorry. I'm talking. What is an equivalent term? This is part of my problem. Like, off the hook. That's just like me being such a poser. But so the in-person voting, you basically have a dead even race here in some of in these totals with Republicans and Democrats. I mean, the difference here is under 2 percentage points when it comes to in-person party registration. But you go over to mail-in ballots and you've got an 8 or 9 point difference. And that makes, like, in numbers wise, that's huge. So if you're down, let's say a 1 percentage point in person, but you're up 8 points in returned mail-in ballots, and you figure a 2% discount for people's not doing their ballots correctly the first time, you're ahead then by remarkably different. No, it's not just remarkably different. It's not even amazing and extraordinary. It is like beyond. It is so aberrant from normal. That is what it is. So bizarre, but it doesn't kind of quite get at it. Anyway, you're still getting that gap, and that's what we want to watch for on election night. So the other thing that nobody's talking about, So, I mean, I'm very happy with the early vote turnout. I'm happy with the in-person turnout. These numbers, by the way, are going to start skewing really heavily for Democrats because New York started its early in-person voting this weekend. New York is just going to go for Biden. So, I mean, again, you have to figure that some of these states that are coming online with their early in-person voting, they're going to skew the numbers because of, you know, like New York and California. Those two states are just going to skew the numbers in terms of Democrats. So I wish there was a better way on this website to kind of clear out the givens and really focus on the swing states, which I guess I would consider going up the line: Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, although I'd like to keep an eye on South Carolina because Jamie Harrison is leading Lindsey Graham there. Virginia, I think, is in the bag. West Virginia, you have to wear. Ohio, sure, why not? And then Iowa, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota. Again, Minnesota's like the opposite of Ohio in terms of like, I'm expecting that to go Dems. There's a small chance that it could go for Republicans. Just like I just count out Ohio anymore. I'm not even like trying to win over that demo. Like the rural white guys, you know, just like let their rural white wives cancel out their votes, and let's focus on young people and people of color in the city and suburban residents of all ethnic backgrounds. Then moving over, I'm interested in Colorado, Arizona, and Nevada. Those are the states that I'm going to be looking at on election night. And what I want to see is, you know, that sort of banking of votes. I don't know. I think Pennsylvania, I'm not quite sure what they're doing. I know in Wisconsin, they're resourcing areas to just dedicate some poll workers to process absentee, mail-in, and in-person ballots the whole day on the election. So in Wisconsin, when the polls open at 7 a.m., they can start processing those ballots. They don't have to wait until the polls close to open up every single absentee ballot. So hopefully we'll actually get that vote counted in some of the a good portion of that vote counted early on in the night. Yeah, maybe ludicrous. Yeah, that's absurd. That's better. Yeah, absurd, ridiculous, ludicrous. Yeah, I think those are better. Thank you, Trans Gamer Girl. Buffoonishittery. Yeah, I think Trans Gamer Girl's got it. Ludicrous kind of gets at it, and absurd. That's far closer to like the emotion that I'm feeling in terms of mapping it onto a linguistic concept. Thank you. All right. So there's a whole thing that nobody's talking about. And it's really going to mess with our ability to follow what's happening on election night. So let me tell you a little story about how elections work. And I think I can just go to camera now because there's something on the screen that's going to be relevant to this. Boop. All right. So get whatever drink you want, or get into bed, or curl up, because Christy, you know, like Auntie Christy's going to tell you a story. I feel fuzzy. I have to figure out how to sharpen up this stupid. I've got like a really expensive Logitech 920 HD freaking webcam, and I swear to God, it looks like it's, at least for me, it looks like it's about, you know, 320. And I'm like, why did I pay money for this crap if I can't make it freaking work? Anyway. All right. So, in normal election times, a long time ago, the media companies would get together, ABC, CBS, Fox, NBC, probably CNN as well, and they would pool their resources and hire a professional company. They would appoint an academic to head this effort. And the goal was to enact a national exit polling operation that would interview voters as they left the polls in order to provide data to all of the media that was of high quality, that was rigorous and academic, and that they will all use. So instead of each media company trying to run a national exit poll, which would be super expensive and redundant. They all just kind of got together. Now, until his death, Alan McCutcheon, Professor Alan McCutcheon, was the person who was in charge of that after, do you guys remember 2000? Maybe you're too young, but in 2000, Florida, they initially called Florida for Gore, and then they changed it, and they took back the call, and then eventually it went for Bush in the end. There was a whole kerfuffle over that. Like, there was a congressional investigation, and the guy who was running the polling at the time got fired. And the guy who took over that after that situation was Alan McCutcheon. And I was fortunate enough to meet him. I was his graduate teaching assistant on a course at the University of Essex. He was a wonderful man, absolutely delightful person, loved life, loved swimming, but unfortunately died a couple years ago. So I don't know who's kept up. I don't know who's running it at the time currently, but my point here being is that they had a very professional operation that was designed on a very strict sampling framework to go out to various, you call them bellwether districts, and interview people who were leaving the polling locations on a random basis, right? So there would be like, you'd click a clicker, and like every fourth person, you would stop and ask them if you could ask them a few questions the exit polls. Now, nobody's talking about this that I've seen, but the fact is that we can't, like, this exit polling data this year is going to be crap. One, I don't even know if people are going to be willing to talk to an interviewer. I mean, you might be able to have people outside with their masks doing the interviews. But because, unless that there is a secret operation where they're going and interviewing people who are doing early voting that I haven't seen any coverage of, and that they're doing phoning on, like, people who return their mail-in ballots that nobody's talking about. The only people who are going to get polled on election day are the Republicans who waited until the last day to cast their ballots. And if you ask that sample of people, it's not going to be representative of the voting population, because if 40% of the people have already voted, what you're going to get is a small mix of independents, a small mix of Democrats, and then overwhelming numbers of Republicans. Our exit polling data for 2020 is just crap. Like, you can't, it's going to be representative of Republicans. I want to say, like if they, I don't even know if they're doing this, to be honest, right? So if they're not even bothering, I guess we could look it up, election night exit polling, because normally on an election night, they would, because the way that they do it, so again, getting back to the story, the way that they do it with the exit polls is that they start at 7 o'clock in the morning, and they get people out in person at some, secure Republican ones and some secure Democrat ones and Democratic ones, some that are leaning Republican, leaning Democrat, purely 50-50 swing. And they know how those districts voted in the past. They know the general turnout of that district in the past. And so as the day goes along, they can get a pretty good sense if the trends are, if people are identifying as Democrat at pretty much the same rate that they have in the past, then they can, like, okay, well, all things being equal, ceteris paribus, this district is going to perform very similarly to how it turned out, how it did last time. If it's the case that there is, the Democrats have basically, like, their percentage is up 15 points compared to elections in the past, well, then you have to watch for the rest of the day. But you can say, like, right now, this looks like there's more motivated Democrats or Republicans, whatever it is in this district. That information, they don't wait till the end of the day to turn that in. Right? They send it in at different parts of the day. So you might do, like, 50 interviews. So, like, you're a poll watcher, interviewer, right? You get your list of questions that you're meant to ask. You stand outside with your clipboard and your forms, whatever. And you're meant to, like, click, okay, there's one person walking out who voted, 2 people who walked out, 3, here's my 4th, and go and ask that person if they have 5 minutes to answer some surveys or answer some questions about voting. And then that person goes by and you start over, and like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you ask the next person. You just pull people out randomly. Random sampling, right? And you do that enough in a population, and if 50,000 people in that district are voting, you're going to get a random sample that broadly, like it was in how sampling works, represents the people who are voting in that district. Might not represent everybody who lives in the district, but it should be broadly representative of the people who are voting in that district or in that ward. All right. And then at 10 o'clock in the morning, no, probably now they don't have paper. They probably have CAPI. They have computer-assisted like survey things. And you upload that information to a main data frame. So there's a centralized location somewhere in the country where all of these CAPIs or whatever versions they're using now are uploading their information, and then there are experts who are synthesizing it, and they're looking at it at the state level, and they're looking at it at the regional level, and they have all that data from the last one. So they're tracking throughout the day, okay, well, at 10 o'clock in the morning for the last 3 elections, this amount of people turned out, and this time we're seeing double the rate of turnout, or a third of the rate of turnout. They can track that stuff. And so as the day goes on, they get, like more and more exit polling information. And then when the polls close, there might be some people still waiting in line, but you've broadly interviewed, let's say by that point, 85, 90% of the people who are voting. And then like, even if there's 10% waiting in line, you're just going to get around the margins. And the news corporation, or the news coverage corporations, I mean, they are corporations, but the news companies will use that exit polling data to like fill the news cycle. They'll say, oh, we're getting some early returns on the exit polls. They'll say, though, this kind of like these people are voting, like in this way, and these are people who are turning out, and this is what they. But that's all out of the water now. All of that is blown out of the water. Will that not play into the Trump rigging narrative because of the exit poll shock? Well, I think this is where the duty of the media has to come in to say, like, our exit polls. I don't even know if they can do exit polls. Like, and that's exit polls. Let's just look, because what is the point? Of doing them this time, like if you can't get a representative sample. So exit polls 2020, primary and caucuses, exit poll. Okay, so here is CNN exit polls. All right, let's have a look at CNN. Then there's a Pew one, because I'm wondering how they're going to fill time on election night. No. These are the primary. Let's see. 3 days ago. Aha. All right. Pew Research. Good professional outlet. Election night marks the end of one phase of campaign 2020 and the start of another. Millions of Americans will trek to their local polling place, cast their vote. That evening, after the polls close, they'll settle down in front of their television to watch the returns roll in. Just about every statement. Okay. Sometime that night or early in the next morning, the networks and wire services will call the race, and Americans will know whether President Trump has won a second term or been ousted by former Vice President Joe Biden. Just about every statement in the previous paragraph is false, misleading, or at best lacking important context. Over the years, Americans have gotten used to the election nights coming off like a well-produced game show with a big reveal coming before bedtime. I have to say, this is true. I remember back in 2012. And I was making this really big deal of election night in Britain when I was still at the University of Essex. And I remember organizing a projector and booking a room in the student common area in the government department. And we were just going to broadcast like between Fox and but however we could stream live. And the guy I was dating at the time was like, I don't know, why is this? He was used to British elections. And in British elections, like, you get a couple constituencies coming back early. Sunderland and, like, Newcastle have a bit of a race. But then it, like, takes for freaking ever. And you start getting returns at, like, 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. Most people will watch the exit poll predictions at about 10 o'clock in the evening. And then they'll go to bed. And they'll wake up and there'll be a new prime minister, or there'll be the same prime minister. And he just didn't understand why I was so excited about the elections. But as he watched the night unfold, like this column and this column, who gets votes and this many delegates in this state. And it's much more like a football game. It's much more like a game of territory in American football. And he was like amazed at how exciting it was. And it all was over within 4 hours. You get like the early returns at 8, and then it moves across the country, and you generally have a result by 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, for Europeans. It is like a game show. Here's our guide to what happens after the polls close on election night. While you might remember some of the details from civics class, others were new to even us. Keeping them in mind helps you make sense of what promises to be an election night like no other. By election night, even before the pandemic struck, Americans had been shifting away from lining up on the polls on election day, which makes sense if there's millions of us and they under-resource the areas. Oh, you know what? I need to change my screen. I'm sorry, everyone. I was so busy talking to the screen, I forgot to do this, and I wasn't looking at your comments either. All right. More people than ever are likely to vote in person, by absentee or mail ballot, or by taking ballots they've filled out at home to drop at a drop box or other secure location. Close to half of the ballots cast in this year's primary season were absentee or mail-in or in person. The writing, it was 47 million, now we know it's 57 million. Mail ballots pose a challenge to election workers because they must be manually removed from their envelopes, verified as valid before they can be fed into the tabulation machines. So yeah, we know it's going to take a little bit longer. Let's see. So here are the places that can process them on receipt, which is quite a lot of the western states. The ones that I guess we're interested in, Wisconsin processes on election day. So again, but they can start at 7 o'clock in the morning when the polls open. Indiana, who cares? Kentucky, who cares? Pennsylvania would be close, depends on how Trump does in the rural areas. Mississippi and Alabama, I'm not worried about flipping those. Ohio, not sure. And Florida, upon more than 2 weeks. So, I mean, I don't really know how long we're going to have to wait for some of these. Let's see. Yeah, here it says, in Wisconsin, ballot processing may begin after polls open on election day. Also in 23 states plus DC, mail ballots postmarked by election day can still be counted. If it's within 22,000 votes, again, those mail-in ballots will maybe hold things up. But again, if Democrats bank a lot of votes before election day, that shouldn't be. But they're not talking about the exit polls, the electors, final outcome, Congress, blah, blah, blah. No. There's nothing here about the exit polls. Ooh. 2020 election exit poll. Is this? No, that's tight. Yeah, I don't see anything here about how they're going to run 2020 exit polls, what to expect, elections. Again, I think this is less about, they're looking at outcomes. I'm trying to think, exit poll. Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen. So that's something to watch. Okay. Please teach that to Kev. We only got a chat backdrop this week and it's pink. He gave you a pink drop. Yeah. So I'm not sure. Let me try early. Because again, I mean, the exit polls are not the results. When they're talking about exit polls, they're talking about the actual final results. And an exit poll is not the result. The result is the result. An exit poll is what you get. It's a sample of people who voted, but it's not the results. So yeah, you like exit polls from Super Tuesday states, but that's not the final counts. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not quite sure what the media is going to do. I might have to wait till election night to find out. Try one more time. Yes, coronavirus poses a challenge to exit votes. Yes, and decision desks. Yes, this is what I'm talking about. See, this is what I'm talking about. No, and thank you, Hindustan Times, for covering this. All right, okie. Let's see. All right, you know what, guys? I'm gonna take a quick break here because I drank a lot of coffee this morning. I need to run. I want to fill up my coffee and I want to take a comfort break. So I stay there, stay tuned. We're going to come back and learn whatever this has to say about exit polling and maybe we'll get the answer we're looking for. If not, then I guess we're just going to give up because I can't keep wasting your time on this. All right, so let's put on some music and we'll fade me out and we'll come back in 2 minutes or so. Hey there, everyone. All right, I am back. We're going to check out the HindustanTimes.com, see if they got information on the American election I can't find from U.S. outlets, or at least not first in my results, because I'm too lazy to look any further. Alrighty-dighty. I'm just going to tell you guys, like, I'm just going to read this out because I saw a line already, and I was like, they could quote me in these interviews. Like, you guys are getting some fresh, hot off the presses, like insider stuff. People in the States can't find this unless they go to the Hindustan Times. All right, let's go. Maybe it's an AP story. I don't know. No, it looks like a local reporter. It's been a long tradition for U.S. television networks to call projected winners on election night as results trickle in. But the unique circumstances of 2020 are likely to create numerous challenges to that practice. Decision desks, set up by media outlets to project winners of each state, which will determine the presidential race, are gearing up for a complicated election night amid uncertain timing for counting of mail-in and absentee ballots, and fears about premature claims of victory. In a campaign marked by the COVID-19 pandemic, the old methods of exit polls are less useful than in the past, says Kostas Pangalopoulos, I think, chair of political science at Northeastern University and member of the NBC News Decision Desk team. Quote, with the rise in early voting, what's on your t-shirt? Oh, there you go. I'll show you what's on my t-shirt. Dump Trump. Wait, oh, point my boobs this way. There you go. Dump Trump. That's what's on there. With the rise in early voting, absentee and mail-in voting no longer the case, we can survey voters at the polling places and make accurate predictions. Is this not what I just said? Is this not? That's what I just told you guys. I've got the fresh stuff for you. I got the goods for you here. Some fear an early tally based on votes cast in person on election day may distort the outcome and prompt President Donald Trump to claim victory before absentee and mailed-in ballots are counted, opening up the potential for chaos. Like, well, no, because we already talked about people are aware of this, so it just means we're going to have to wait longer and that we're not going to get exit polls. We're not talking about my prediction. Sorry, Mr. Just catch up. Just like ride the wave. You'll catch it. CBS said its decision desk will combine exit polling data and vote tallies with the network's proprietary polling and survey. Okay, some 100,000 people around the United States. Some analysts have warned of a red mirage, which will show Trump ahead based on early vote counts, even if the absentee ballots counted later reverse a trend. The contest will be won not only at the ballot box and in the courts, but in the court of public opinion, said a Guardian essay by more than 20 members of the American Political Scientists Association. All media should adopt the strict standard that no state winner should be declared till the number of votes remaining to be counted has been certified to be less than the margin between the two major parties' candidates. All right, so can I translate that into human being speak for you? All right, so what they're saying is, and I think most media companies will do this. They understand the problems, like Steve Kornacki at NBC, the people who run these professionally, or at least who have polling advisors who appear as experts, guests on their shows. They will know that you can't just use exit polling on the day of. You can't just ask people on the day who they're going to vote for. They also know that because of the way that it's processed, and you have this too, like you always know that like 1% of the county is returned. Sorry, coffee. Or 10%. It's not like they just put up these numbers. If you think about how an election night runs, they start off and there's like 1% return, 2% return, 3% return, and the numbers change. And they will explain, like, okay, well, we've just got this urban county in. This urban county tends to vote for the Democratic candidates. So what we need to do is wait till these other outlying rural counties come in to see how the conservative candidate performed in those areas. So I don't want to overplay this. I think there's a little bit of hyping up of declaring early. But what they're saying here about the winner should not be declared until the number of votes remaining to be counted has been certified to be less than the margin between the two major candidates is what they're saying is if there is 50,000 votes left to be counted and one of the candidates is up by 2 million votes, even if all 50,000 votes went to their opponent it wouldn't matter. They'd still be up like by 2 million less 50,000. All right? Or if there's 1 million votes to be cast, but the candidate is winning by 6 million. Like, even if, let's say Biden is up by 6 million votes in a state, let's say it's like in New York, and 1 million votes are still out there to be cast, well, they can go ahead and declare New York. Because even if Trump got all 1 million, Biden would still be up by 5 million. And this was, if you remember the controversy that happened with Karl Rove on Fox News, was it 2012? I think, was it 2012? Where the decision desk at Fox declared for, I think, Ohio, for Obama. And Karl Rove was like, no, you still have these outlying counties. You still have these heavily skewed Republican counties to come in. And the stats guys were like, well, yeah, but there's not enough votes in those counties to make up the difference. Like, Obama's lead is just too big. It wouldn't matter. These results won't change the final outcome. Once you're in that position, then you can declare a state. And they're saying here, you need to wait until you have that gap of remaining vote to be counted versus the lead of whoever's winning that state before you declare. The newly formed National Task Force on Election Crises has called on media organizations and the National Election Pool, which gathers data for the outlets, to use extra caution for the projections on November 3rd. I think most people are aware of this by now. And most people are prepping for it. I actually think that in a lot of cases, well, not in a lot of cases, I think we're probably going to have a result earlier than most people. I don't expect this to go 3 weeks again. There might be, I mean, there is a slim possibility that a state like Pennsylvania could be the thing that, like Florida in 2000. However, I'm just kind of not with the turnout. I'm not with the numbers we're seeing. I'm not saying that Biden is a shoo-in. What I'm saying is, right now, all things being equal, I would put my money on Biden. I think everything is breaking his way. Seniors are breaking his way. Independent voters are breaking his way. The youth vote is breaking his way. Women are breaking his way. Like, all the major demographics. Like, he's got rural white dudes with less than 4 years of college. He's got that group down. But there's just not enough of them. And, will they go and wait in line if there's a huge line, or will they, so that's the other thing. The coalition said that 70% of all ballots may be cast by mail or other absentee methods. It could take days or a week to complete an accurate count. Again, you don't need the perfect accurate count. It doesn't have to be 100%. It just has to be outside of that margin of potential swinging, or a vote that could actually change the result. Fox said in a statement, it'll be collecting data and making projections without bias. The integrity of our election desk is rock solid. We will call this election carefully and accurately. Fox Decision Desk Chief Aaron Mishkin told a recent podcast, I want to say, I listened to that podcast. Was that, who have I listened? So I've been listening to, let's see, this is Abnormal. I don't know, the Daily Beast podcast. I've been listening to the Lincoln Project podcast, and also there was another one. Sadly, I hate to say it, but I listen to Charlie Kirk's The Bulwark just because he's got good guests on. So basically, if you've got polling data for me, I'm going to listen to your podcast. And he was actually saying this decision desk guy was the same person who, when Karl Rove was trying to bully him out of declaring for Obama, he's like, dude, the numbers. It's just the numbers. But Desk Chief Aaron Mishkin told a recent podcast on the network that making the call will be complicated by new voting patterns, but touted a new tool, quote, that is actually optimal for measuring how people are voting in an election where over 60% of the people are not going to be exiting poll on election day. Are not going to be exiting poll? Exit? I don't know what that means. I may be polled on election day. Despite the fears, Pew Research Center found 82% of adults have confidence in their main news sources that they'll make the right call, with slightly more confidence amongst Democrat Joe Biden supporters. All right, yeah, so that's something to watch for. That election night will just, and for that reason, they can't start putting out results until the results are released, but they've always been sort of like hinting at those early exit poll results. Those, we're not going to have those. It was October the 25th. Yeah, this is hot off the press. This is, oh, maybe that's just when it's just updated. So that is one of the things that we're going to be looking for, or I'm going to be. cautioning people about on election day is that we're just not going to have good same-day exit poll data. The same-day exit poll data is going to skew very heavily toward Republican voters because those people have put off voting until the very last minute. And yeah, some of them might be dedicated enough to sort of show up at their high school, and as it gets dark at 5 o'clock in the evening in November, potentially on a rainy day, to stand outside for 4 hours to vote at the high school gym. Maybe they will. But I just was actually listening to the Lincoln Project podcast from this most recent one, and the number of people who think that Trump is going to win the election has been steadily declining by a couple points every time they ask people to predict it. And there is a sort of like, if you go out and you're like, I'm going to vote for Trump, but I think he's going to lose, are you going to wait 4 hours to vote for a guy who's going to lose? There is a psychological dimension to this. And I think that one of the reasons why Democrats have lower turnout is because there are some voters who could be converted from likely voters into voters who, because of the under-resourced nature of their local polling place, they just couldn't go home. Or, there have been cases, like I know in the city of Madison, where you think Dane County would sort this crap out, but they run out of ballots. They literally like physically run out of ballots. And then people in that district in that ward, have to wait for them to go and run more off. Like, how many people are going to be like, okay, well, I'm going to dip now and I'm going to come back, and then never come back? How many of them are like, I'm out, I don't have time for it, and Dane County is going to vote this way anyway, so I'm just not going to waste my time. So we'll see it's going to be an interesting election day, is all I have to say, which reminds me I need to take vacation. I have to put in for vacation. I've got still have several days. I think I still have 10 paid days of holiday left, so I might take 2. I definitely need a break. I took off Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and it wasn't enough. Righty-dighty. I'm going to be honest, guys. That is an hour. I'm going to keep it to an hour because, one, I think I get higher views when I don't go and do a 2.5 hour show. Secondly, I've got some D&D coming up tonight. I just played D&D last night, plus we did the movie show, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to be streaming on Monday night with Kevin as well. That is 5 streams in the course of 3 days. That's a lot. For those of you who do watch my gaming channel, we are not going to be streaming next Saturday, and we're not going to be streaming next Tuesday. So basically, there's going to be a week off, and I will, because it's Halloween, and I'll need to talk to my Dragon Heist peeps, see if they want to play next Sunday morning for some of them, or if they're going to be hungover from Halloween or whatever else. So yeah, election night. Kevin and I are discussing doing an election night stream. I've asked him to host it because he's got the Twitch thing going now. And also, if Kevin is hosting, then I can kind of, while he's talking, or invite some guests on ideally. While he's talking, I can keep an eye on the returns and break in with updates or let people know when we're going to get some stuff going on. Now, I'm not promising that we will have the results, because the results will come out when they're going to come out. But yes, I'll ask Kevin to book that now. And I know that I want to invite T1J. I want to invite Highly Critical. I want to invite Steve Shives, also Philip Rose. So there are some people, some YouTubers, some kind of lefty types. It'd be wonderful if Chrisiosity popped in as well. So might just invite a bunch of people to an election night show and give them a hyperlink where they can just jump in for a few minutes and join us as we react to the dribbling of results. But it probably will start maybe a half hour before the polls close, or maybe even as the polls close. There might be some obviously states like New York State where it's just going to be obvious who's going to win because of they're just deep blue or deep red, and there's no point in getting on the air an hour before polls close and stretching things out. So I don't know the time, but yes. I'm glad you had a good Sunday show, Flint. Enjoy, and hello, Rory Katz. Thank you to everyone who stopped by. Appreciate your time and attention. I have been Christy. You are always awesome. And we will see each other next Sunday when we'll figure out the very, almost the end early vote count, because it'll be the Sunday before, so people will probably be less likely to put their ballots in the post, although there might be some last-minute early voting. And yeah, we'll see if these trends continue. So, goodbye from me. Until next time, I hope you guys have a fantastic day wherever it is, whenever it is you are. Bye.